behavior of the neurons, the activity of the neurons is being changed because these hormones get all the way inside of the cells to actually change what they do.
That's exactly right. And, you can think about these changes we can think about the rewiring in terms of synaptic plasticity and structural changes, but you can also think about they can really change the way cells function. So
Mhm.
once you're impacting the expression of genes, and I should say, I meant to say this before, but when we talk about estrogen receptors and progesterone receptors inducing these long-term effects, there are many, 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 many genes that are responsive to these hormones. So it's not just genes that would be important for things you would think of as being specific to caregiving, but
Right,
I mean,
right.
we're talking about basic signaling molecules that respond to these changes. And so you really can have just about every neurobiological and physiological system impact.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So changes throughout the brain, changes in the core circuitry that's directly related to maternal care, but changes, wholesale changes, many circuits all over the place doing all sorts of different stuff. I would imagine. But one thing I want to say up front here too for people is to connect this to a lot of other things that we often talk about in the podcast. Estradiol and progesterone. Can you talk about where they come from in relation to cholesterol?
Sure, they're synthesized directly from cholesterol in a biosynthesis pathway. And actually, there are many, many different pathways. I won't go through all of them, but they can sometimes they can be originally derived from cholesterol, but many of these pathways also interact with one another. And so there
Mhm.
are many different pathways to produce estradiol and progesterone. This is a simple way to
Yeah.
say it.
So from cholesterol, you go to pregnenolone, then to progesterone, and then there's many different branching paths you can take, and some of those paths then hook into each other. But all of these hormones, or the ones we just mentioned, are ultimately derived from cholesterol, and so these are all fat soluble things. They can get through the blood-brain barrier, et cetera, et cetera. There's, it's obviously a huge change. It's complex. There's a lot to orchestrate. There's a lot that needs to go right. There's probably a lot that
Mhm.
could go better or worse under different conditions, and a lot of places where things can go wrong. What are some of the common ways that the pregnancy or the changes in the brain in particular of the mother might get disrupted, even though she's still going to give birth and have the babies and stuff? So what I'm thinking of here is, are there common stressors that a pregnant female might encounter that are going to start to affect the rewiring of her brain and what the hormones are doing and all of that stuff?
Yes, absolutely. Stress is a major predictor of mood disorders throughout pregnancy and in the postpartum period. And I really think, again, we're sort of just in the beginning stages of understanding the complexities of how stress really does affect hormones and also how hormones can affect our stress reactivity, because all of these things are sort of able to interface with one another. So we know that, stress during pregnancy, as I mentioned, can produce long-term changes in terms of mood regulation. It can, during pregnancy and in the postpartum period, are one of the systems that's being altered by these hormones is the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which regulates our stress response. And so, experiencing chronic stress while that system is sort of being functionally altered can produce these long-term changes in stress reactivity and, as I mentioned, in mood disorders as well.